Welcome to another edition of Reaching Out. With me today, our special guest is President of Local 32BJ SEIU, Héctor Figueroa. Héctor, welcome to Reaching Out with Greg Floyd.
Thanks, Greg, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you.
Now, your members, you have about over 200,000 members, right?
We have 145,000 members, okay, and another 12,000 that we're in the process of organizing in the union. Our members do service work. They work in apartment buildings, commercial office buildings, stadiums, some museums. More recently, we've been organizing airport workers and also school cleaners.
Now, you're also involved in a major contract negotiation here in New York City with some of your members working in residential apartment buildings. Are you able to give us an update on that without going into detail of the negotiations?
Absolutely. We represent 30,000 apartment building workers that they serve tenants and shareholders across 3,300 buildings in New York City, from Manhattan to Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island. And they actually take care of over 2 million New Yorkers every day. And our contract expires on April 20th. And negotiations are just in the early stages, but we want to make clear that this is a time that working families need to hold on to good jobs, that employers should really seek to maintain our standards and our benefits, that more than ever the city needs middle-class jobs to be part of what our communities can count on. And we're going into these negotiations to make sure that we preserve good jobs and that our members can live in the city that they work. So we call our campaign this year, Making New York Home. We make New York home for over 2 million people. We have the right to make New York home for us too.
Now, you're in the Service Employees International Union. Can you tell us what kind of members are in the SEIU, Service Employees International Union, and what do they do across the country? Nat?
Absolutely. We have 2.2 million workers in the Service Employees International Union. We are healthcare workers, like people are familiar with 1199 SEIU.
Yes.
We represent on the healthcare sector, hospital workers, home care, nursing homes. We also represent some public sector workers, largely school cleaners or school maintenance workers, and then in some states also other public services. And then a significant number nationwide of property service workers, again, who take care of facilities, make sure that people who work are working in good, safe conditions, and that they also can be safe in their homes.
Now, Local 237 represents public sector employees. We're a purely public sector union. We share some similarities. Mm-hmm. One, we both agree that labor has been under attack. I know I wasn't too happy with the attacks. How did you feel about them?
I think labor has been made a scapegoat of an economic crisis that has been really provoked by the greed in the financial sector, and that we have yet to recover from the Great Recession of 2009, and working people and unions, quite frankly, were under attack even before then. So we all need to come together and tell our story. Most people don't understand that labor unions are really necessary not only for the members, but for all workers. Because yes, when we fight for good contracts, when we increase benefits, the private sector, non-union workers that are out there, they get benefited by those settlements. And then through politics, like we have seen more recently with the paid sick leave, we also advocate for things that are beneficial for all workers.
Now, you mentioned Wall Street, I believe, the financial market and the crisis there. Do you realize not one person has been prosecuted, not put in jail, prosecuted, brought up on charges for that financial meltdown?
Yeah, I mean, it just tells you that we don't only have economic inequality, right? The top 1% yes, getting more of the share of our country's wealth, but we also have political inequality.
Yes.
And that's really one of the big challenges, and why we always say that the fight of labor is really the fight for the middle class, but it's also the fight for democratic values.
You're listening to Reaching Out. I'm Gregory Floyd, President Local 237 Teamsters. Our very special guest is Héctor Figueroa, president of 32BJ SEIU, and we were here talking about what unions can do for the community. Just a little point. You are involved in the DREAM Act.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what the DREAM Act is and who that will benefit? And this will be at least one other example of unions fighting for the good of the greater public and not fighting just for union issues.
Correct. I mean, we have in New York State and around the country countless number of young people who came with their parents as immigrants into this country, either overstay their visas because they needed to work, or they came escaping economic hardship or political persecution. And they were brought by their parents. They do not have papers, but they excel in our schools. They are playing with our children in the schoolyards. They are studying with our children from K to 12. When it comes time for them to pursue a college education, then they are hit by the fact that they cannot participate on state tuition programs in New York State and cannot rely on assistance from the state to pursue higher education. We've seen that's wrong. These kids can give a lot back to our community. They are really together with our children every day, and we've seen that the state should really set aside a program for them to participate in higher education. And quite frankly, the state should look for ways to increase access for higher education for all children, those who were born here and those who came, because education is really the path to rebuild the middle class.
Now, you are also involved in the lobbying for pre-K.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us how that's going?
Well, that is going now. Increasingly looks like there will be some form of a compromise, if we want to call it that way. There will be additional funding to make pre-K universal. It is not all that the mayor was pursuing. It looks like the tax on higher income earners to guarantee that program continuing over the years may not happen in this legislative session, but I want to give compliments to the mayor for having brought the issue. And as a parent of a 5-year-old myself that goes to pre-K, I can tell you it makes a huge difference. It identifies, through pre-K education, you can learn a lot about your children before going to elementary school and have the kind of interventions, socialization that makes more likely that they will succeed.
So many young people do not understand what labor unions do and what labor unions are. What can we do to try to educate the young people? Because they don't realize that before unions came into existence, there was no Monday to Friday, there was no holidays, there was no 40-hour work week, and there were no benefits, health care, pensions. These things did not exist.
Yeah, we need to really engage young people, both in school and when they join the workforce. In 32BJ, we have a summer program that we like to call the Youth Brigade, where we ask the daughters and the sons of our members to do some work in the union, be part of our campaigns, be part of our reach out to members of the community. We also have new member orientation programs where somebody is hired in a building so they understand what the union is about. But we need to do more than that. We feel it's important for us to support organizations from civil rights to organizations that advocate for affordable housing in a number of issues and work with them to reach out to young voters, register them to vote, and mobilize them as well. It's still a lot of work that we have to do, but I think that you and I recognize the importance of it.
Yes, and you mentioned affordable housing. And you're also involved in, and as I am, for talking about, speaking about affordable housing. We both agree that there needs to be more affordable housing here in New York City. What is your pitch? What are your ideas about affordable housing?
Well, we believe, like you, that New Yorkers should be able to live in New York City. Too many of our members are being pushed to live farther and farther away from the city. It's not fair for them. And we have to build more affordable housing. We have to bring part of the stock of housing up to code so it can be habilitated for people to live in. And we need to take a look at rent control because we're losing a lot of units that are currently under rent control, are affordable over the years. They become into the open market. So we have our work cut out. We reach out to the industry on a regular basis as part of these negotiations of this apartment contract. We are proposing the idea that we create a task force with the union contract to look on how we can incentivize and look for ways to contribute to the building of affordable housing.
How do you see the new Bill de Blasio administration, Mayor Bill de Blasio's administration, in contrast to the former administration with Mayor Michael Bloomberg? How do you see the contrast?
Well, we see a contrast in tone and style. The administration is very approachable. We can relate to them what our goals and ideas are. With the mayor, the past Mayor Bloomberg, we had a good relationship. We worked with the mayor too, but unfortunately, there was an element of distancing himself from really labor unions and working people in general. And we find it refreshing that this mayor is reaching out. At the same time, it's early to tell where we're going to end up.
Yes.
Either negotiations or maintaining prevailing wage standards or building affordable housing. But we want to believe that we're going to be able to have an opportunity to make our case and work in a more cooperative fashion.
Now, your parents were in the labor movement in Puerto Rico. Can you tell us how that is the same as being in the labor movement here in New York, and how it's different than being in labor unions in New York? And tell us what their positions were and how you grew up.
Yeah, sure. My parents were both teachers, and they struggled for a very long time to win the union. I remember as a young child going into public schools, when the teachers went on strike to form a union, I had to be on the picket lines with my parents. And I understood very early on the struggle and the sacrifice to form a union. They also vested in me the values of solidarity, of really not being afraid to fight for your rights and to seek for the common good. So I'm always thankful to them for that. My mother passed away last year.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And her grandfather was a slave in Puerto Rico. My grandfather was born 7 years after the abolition of slavery in Puerto Rico. And when I came here, one of the things that I brought with me was also awareness about the complexity of race relations, because it's not insignificant in Puerto Rico.
Right.
In the U.S., I would say the biggest challenge is how out of the different backgrounds that we all bring, racially, culturally, ethnically, we can find our common humanity and then forge a strong movement that erases those differences for the purpose of action, but recognizes and values them when we want to celebrate the human condition. So I feel that we need to fight for our democracy here, and that we have great opportunities. Sometimes we take them for granted, and we should use those opportunities to continue to deliver for working people.
You've been listening to Reaching Out on 970 AM The Answer. Our very special guest, 32BJ SEIU President Héctor Figueroa. Thank you, Héctor, for being on the show.
Thank you, Greg.